Hello and welcome to the first edition of Friday Focus for the spring semester. I am Shane Jackson. I'm joined with women's basketball beat writer Scott Chasen and our columnist Griffin Hughes. First of all, just want to point out that KU played TCU last night, or Wednesday night, and they're playing K-State on Saturday, and Scott's wearing a purple shirt.
Well, if you think about it, Shane, purple is actually blue plus red, so I am both representing the University of Kansas and the two universities that the school is playing, so actually I think I'm doing a fine job of being neutral.
How did the two best colors in the world mix to get the most evil color you could think of?
Have you never seen crayons? It does pretty nicely, actually.
I believe that happens. I think it's just ironic.
Well, let's get to talking about basketball since we're already off to a bad start about this show. Talking about the men's game on Wednesday night, KU was able to sneak away with a win on the road, but it seemed like TCU just outplayed Kansas in almost every statistical category. What was your guys' biggest takeaway from the game?
Rebounds. That was what was the most disturbing to me, because when you look at Kansas, you think front court, and you think all the guys they have in the front court, Cliff Alexander, Jamari Traylor, Perry Ellis, they still got out-rebounded by TCU. That was really disturbing to me. It was also disturbing that only two starters had more than 17 minutes. It shows me that Bill Self, even this late in the season, still doesn't have a rotation and a starting lineup that he really likes.
Here's why I'm not as concerned. I look at Perry Ellis, who picks up 2 fouls in the first minute, whatever, of the game. He doesn't play the rest of the half. Then he goes through halftime. He comes out cold. Great article today by Tom Fair of SB Nation talked about this, playing with foul trouble. And when he came out of the game, it really disrupted the momentum. It disrupted the rhythm. Came back in. He couldn't do any of the things he was doing earlier. He scored the first 5 points for KU. So I'm less concerned overall of the effort. I think that really messed a lot of things up. Hunter Mickelson played like 8 minutes, and guys were being asked to do things they weren't. The one thing for me that really concerns me, it's every time Frank Mason checks out of the game now, you see the same thing. The other team goes on a run. This time it was Brandon Green commits a turnover, KU gives up an and one, TCU goes on an 8-0 run in the first half to close it, and come tournament time, it really feels like Mason's going to be playing a lot of minutes. So that's what's worrying me right now.
Yeah, if there was anything I was concerned about, is those last couple minutes, TCU really made a run there. Got on a 9-0 run in the last 2 minutes, I believe. And just what are you guys concerned at all with the way KU closed out that game on the road?
Yeah, I was really concerned. They got outscored in the fourth quarter. It's something that we've been seeing on and off all season with them getting outscored, or in the second half, I should say, not the fourth quarter. Which is, some teams do that, and some teams can handle it, and some teams can't. In the second half, 8 of Kansas's 28 total points came in a 3-minute stretch. And so if you're looking at, in the second half, against not great teams, having to go on these runs in 3 minutes to get a majority of your points, what I want to see is a more consistent form of scoring, both from the free throw line and from the three-point line. And by the way, from the free throw line, Kansas shot just 65%, which is letting a lot of free points go.
And if you take away Landon Lucas, who I believe was 6 of 6, they only shot 50%. So that was an issue. I agree with you there. Most concerning thing for me down the stretch, free throws. I know Mason missed a couple. I don't think you can count on that a lot, even though they did win the game. TCU got that shot off. Brandon missed one, which, I think he was like, 4 or 5 or 5 of 6. But again, you can't really count on him missing. The guy's a 90+% free throw shooter. So I think it's just more the little things. One of the players after the game, I don't remember which one, said they felt a little overconfident. Maybe it was Self, actually. And it kind of showed. I just think it's a lot of the little things in there. So I'm not really concerned about it, but they need to get it corrected moving forward, definitely.
And looking ahead to this weekend, KU has K-State on Saturday and then Iowa State on Monday. How important, though they are both home games, how important is this about 72-hour stretch here for Kansas?
Iowa State is probably more important than Kansas State, or at least deserves more of the focus. Kansas State, it's a rivalry game. So you know what you're going to get out of it from the home fans. You come home, they're going to be charged up, they're going to be juiced, they're ready to go. They haven't had a game in 2 weeks at Allen Fieldhouse. So you know what you're going to get against K-State. Also, K-State is 1-4 this season in true road games. They haven't won at all in the Big 12 on the road, just 65 points per game. And the last time out against West Virginia, they had 25 turnovers. And when you look at Kansas, they've done a good job of limiting turnovers, at least when they're playing well. Iowa State, though, is another animal. They've got a lot of talent, and they've got some front court depth that can really mess with Kansas because they're not typical front court players. George Niang, he can step back and he can take a three, and that clearly disrupted everyone who was on him.
I definitely agree with you as far as Kansas State's concerned. They have a pretty good Big 12 record right now, but if you look at games remaining, they have Kansas twice, Iowa State, Texas, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Texas again on the road, at Baylor, at TCU. I don't see any way that team finishes above 500 in the Big 12. Not at all something I'm looking at. But that ISU game, you really nailed it with that. This team needs to play a lot better than they did when they went down to Ames, and they had a chance to kind of pull it out at the end there, but it's got to be a clean game because a lot of players for Iowa State, they've had their moments this year, but they've had a lot of guys have bad shooting performances. I look back at the game they lost to South Carolina, where they shot really poorly from three-point range. I don't think they had their first make until the last 5 minutes of the game. It's got to be a clean game for Kansas because you can't count on Iowa State to miss. I mean, you look at how they play against Kansas in past years. You've seen some crazy finishes, close games. You think of the Elijah Johnson game, the one when McLemore banked in the three. No, you're right. They're just a different animal. So I just think it has to be a clean game for the team.
But then you were right before when you said when Frank Mason is off the court, it presents a real problem. In that Iowa State game, they started to come back, but it ended up being the times when Frank Mason wasn't on the court that ended up dooming Kansas in the end.
Yeah, especially because he's an energy guy, and so much of that problem was they got down the court first. And when Mason stays on the perimeter and he's facilitating, other than those times he does drive, and he's been a lot better about getting to the hoop. He's been able to get back, whereas the bigs didn't really do a good job of that. So I would expect Bill Self to have hit this extremely hard in practice, and I would be shocked if Iowa State scored very many baskets in transition off of makes.
And by the way, Iowa State shoots 49% from the field as a team. If you're looking at any team that could quiet a home court advantage and home court fans like at Allen Fieldhouse, it's a team that can make big threes. And they did it. We saw it at Hilton, where they were charging up the fans by making big shots. Now they just shut them down at Allen Fieldhouse.
Moving over to the women's side now, 3 games in a row for the Lady Jayhawks after starting off 0-5 in Big 12 play. Just what has been the biggest key to their turnaround?
Well, it's been kind of dramatic, but it's not something that was totally unexpected because the team was playing really well. They went into break, and they kind of faltered, and Coach Henriksen kind of noted that with the team out of their day-to-day schedule, it almost felt like every game was being played on the road just because it was so unique, not that the people weren't at the games. They still had pretty average attendance, but that, no one's on campus. They don't have the people there. They aren't going to classes, then to practice, and, they're not getting that every single day. So the team hit a little bit of a rough stretch, but now 3 wins in a row, a couple road wins, which are huge for the team. And you look at the way they're playing overall. They had 9 turnovers in that game against at Iowa State. They didn't do that any other game this year. They haven't done it any game last year. And in fact, the last time they did it was nearly 3 years ago in the NCAA tournament against Tennessee. And that was one of the Sweet 16 teams, the first of 2. So I believe that was Gardner and Knight's freshman year. So the team's just playing a lot better right now that they're back in school. The defense has really come a long way. At the Alabama game at the beginning of the year, they allowed 85 points. Henriksen came into the press conference and was furious. She called out the team's effort. She called out their hustle. She called out their desire to win. She said they didn't have it yet and that they needed to get there, and they've really turned it around. That team has an identity on defense that is really strong, and all the Big 12 coaches come in, and after the game, they just kind of say, you look at their record, it's not great, but that team is playing a lot better than their numbers.
Yep, and you hit the nail on the head with turnovers. They only had 9 in a big win against Iowa State, which was in conference the best win they've had. They turn the ball over 3 fewer times per game in wins than they do in losses. I think that's just it's indicative of how that team's going to play. And yeah, they still turn the ball over a lot, 16 times a game, even when they win. But you look at it kind of like Brett Favre. Yeah, he threw a lot of interceptions, but the big play capability is there, and they really get out in transition, and they play really well. I'm going to add on to what's been the difference here, and I think Lauren Aldridge just really found her confidence, and she's really found what makes her a good player again. We saw it against Cal. We saw a flash of exactly what she could do, and it wasn't stat-wise, but she was a tough matchup defensively. She was a tough matchup offensively. She was really smart about when to drive and when to draw double teams, when to take her shots, and it seemed like she lost it in the first couple Big 12 games. She's found it again. She's been playing well. She's been assisting. She has 20 assists in these last 3 wins, 9 steals, just 14 turnovers. Those are the best marks for her in a 3-game stretch this season. I think a lot of it is her, but then also, of course, Chelsea Gardner.
And then let me piggyback right off of that. I think, to your point, the best games Lauren Aldridge plays are kind of when she isn't really noticeable on the stat sheet in a way, because when she's initiating offense, I mean, they want to throw it into Gardner in the post and get a score, and if you throw it to a post player, typically it's not going to be an assist. You know, you're not going to see those numbers, and she does such a good job at making those little plays, those hustle effort plays, just that don't really show up, kind of like a Travis Relaford almost.
Yeah.
Looking back to his senior year at KU, and it's something that's not really appreciated, but I suspect it will be, come her next few seasons.
I agree.
Another player that's really stepped up, Chelsea Gardner, reigning Big 12 Player of the Week after a 2020 outing last Saturday against West Virginia. What makes her so difficult for teams to match up with her?
It's amazing. She's so good inside that single-handedly how Kansas plays, whether they make a lot of threes or whether they go inside and dominate the paint, it's all related to her.
Yeah.
Every coach comes in and says there are two focuses. You can either go, we're going to guard her inside, we're going to take that away, and then KU will make a lot of threes, or there's the, we're going to let her get hers and see what else happens. And those are the games. She had the 2020 game, I think a few in a row now with 20 points, and
yeah.
It's really a pick your poison type thing. She's one of the best bigs in the nation right now, the way she's playing, and I'm not sure there have been very many teams that could stop her.
No, definitely not. She's had 63 points in these 3 wins. On the year, she shoots 56% from the field. I think that's what makes her so good. You can have a dominant post player, and she is that. Her array of post moves is really fantastic. It's really difficult to deal with. But then in the mid-range and from the baseline, that's really where she's dangerous, because you're asking perimeter defenders to defend pretty much within about a 10, 15-foot radius from the rim. And that's really tough for them because Gardner moves well, she's very athletic, and she shoots the ball really well. And the point guards and the other backcourt players do a fantastic job of getting her involved. And usually they're pretty good about picking out when she needs to just kind of not have the ball for a couple possessions. Teams will relax from her, and then she'll go back and get 5, 6 in a row. And that's exactly what they did in her 2020 game. There was a stretch where she didn't get the ball in her hands for 4 or 5 possessions. The team relaxed, and suddenly they come back and she gets 6 straight points.
Yeah, and definitely, because even when Kansas is missing threes, a lot of them look like they're good because they've got a lot of capable shooters.
Yeah.
So it's not a case of like you see someone pulling up, like the name that comes into my mind right now is Josh Smith, who it's a ridiculous comparison because he's terrible at three-point shooting, but like it's not like bad three-pointers are shooting threes. You're seeing, Lauren Aldridge, very capable. Natalie Knight, Asia Boyd, these are very capable three-point shooters.
Great.
So when they're missing, the team knows like, hey, we got to start getting out to cover these guys, and then Gardner just goes to work inside, especially on the glass. She's so good on the offensive glass.
Real quick, if I told you had to pick one for this weekend to happen, KU women pulling off the upset in Waco against Baylor, or the men's side losing one of these 2 games against Iowa State or K-State? Which one is more likely?
I think I would go with one men's loss, just because, well, they're at home though, but just because Iowa State can have that lights-out game, but I wouldn't put it past the women. They played a really good game against Baylor at home, and they're playing a lot better now.
Yeah, absolutely. I went back and forth on this a lot. I did settle on it's more likely that the men drop one, or it's more likely that the women win in Baylor than for the men to go undefeated. They're not going to lose to K-State, but Iowa State does present its own unique challenges. If they have a good shooting night and they're very able to do that, and they'll have an incentive to do that, to have a great shooting night, you shut down the home fans. But the women, they've just been playing great. And Asia Boyd is an energy giver. She comes in there, and it's just a whole different dynamic on the floor. If she can find her way against Baylor, who, by the way, KU only lost to by 8 the last time they played, one of their better games that they've played this season, I think the women can do it. I think they've all been playing really well. And no matter how good Baylor is, no matter how many great shooters they have, dynamic play in the backcourt, they still don't have anyone who's capable of guarding Chelsea Gardner.
And let me add just one more thing real quick. If you had asked, like, will the men lose one game or the other, the Iowa State game, I would say it's more likely for KU the women to beat Baylor. I think the combined effect of that is probably what's causing my trepidation on that. But to your point, the women are playing absolutely fantastic, best basketball of the year, and I don't think it would shock me if they went in there and it was a 2-point, 3-point game with a couple minutes remaining, and then see what happens.
Yeah, I agree.
That's going to do it for this edition of Friday Focus. Make sure to check out Kansan.com for all your KU-related news. For Scott Chase and Griffin Hughes, I'm Shane Jackson. Thank you for watching, and Rock Chalk.